Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Aditya here. In our AWS comprehensive course, we come to Lambda DevOps session. So we have covered a lot of topics in the Lambda in the earlier sessions. So we are wrapping the Lambda for moving to next topics. So I'm going to explain about those next topics in the future sessions. Maybe in the future I may include Lambda related topics, but that is not near future. So since we have covered a lot of topics, I thought, right, it's better explain you the best practices and limits at one place so that you can able to refer easily. So when it comes to best practices, always, right, write the initialization code for the external dependencies like DB connections, HTTP and SDK connections in your Lambda execution context. That is outside the Lambda function handler. So do you remember the Lambda execution context session where I clearly displayed or showed in the hands-on session how beneficial when you initialize your code outside the function handler. It will improve your performance drastically. Okay, and moving on to the next topic. Always use the Lambda environmental variables, right? The variables which may vary time to time, right? So in such kind of variables, it's advisable to use Lambda environmental variables instead of hard coding inside the code so that you can configure them in future whenever you require. And never recursively call Lambda function. Okay, so what will happen if you recursively call the Lambda function? It may go to an infinite loop. There will be a possibility and which will incur more cost to you, right? That is not an ideal one. So never ever try to call your Lambda function recursively. And the final best practice is always try to optimize the size of your Lambda code. Okay, so always chunk your code, chunk your Lambda function, say smaller parts, and always try to create a smaller package size. And if possible, use layers instead of packing all your dependencies into single packages, right? You have layers, in the layers you can store your dependencies. So always practice these best practices and also enable your provision concurrency for low latency. Okay, so that's about the best practices. So the next topic is limits. So finally the limits of lambda. So we have already seen these limits in theory part, right? So here I am consolidating all these limits for the better reference. The first one is memory size. So we know that the size of a lambda memory, right, could increase us from 180 to 128 MB, which was by default, and we can increase up to 10 GB. And if you increase these memory, right, you can increase 1 MB at a time. And if you increase memory like that, you can indirectly increasing CPUs also. And next one is execution time. We know that Lambda has hot time limit that is 15 minutes. So that is 900 seconds. If you have any application which will execute more than 15 minutes, Lambda is not ideal for you. The third point is the temporary disk capacity. So since Lambda provides this temporary disk for us, that is the /tmp, and we can able to access this temporary location where we can store maximum up to 10 GB of data. And the concurrent execution, by default Lambda is providing the only 10 concurrent executions, but you can increase them by raising a support ticket to AWS. And environmental variables, as we know, we can able to create environmental variables in AWS Lambda, but there was a limit on the size of the environmental variable. You cannot create environmental variable which is more than 4 KB, and we can deploy only 50 MB compressed package. That means if you are deploying your code, right, always ensure your zip file or jar file should be around 50, not more than that. And we can only deploy 250 MB uncompressed package. That means if you uncompress the package which is having your code plus dependencies should always be in the limit of 250 MB. If it is more than 250 MB, your Lambda function will fail. So that's it about the Lambda in our Master Serverless and AWS Comprehensive course. We will meet in the next lecture with AWS API Gateway. We'll start AWS API Gateway. Thanks for watching my videos. Bye.